Nigel, thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed, and congratulations on the award for Imperium Horizons. Very nice to talk to you. I wanted to start by asking you what was the process of design? Obviously, it's a co-design with David. So what was the process of design you went through, and how did you come about designing this game to start with?
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity for the video interview, and also thanks for the award. I'm glad people like the game. Imperium has got quite a long and checkered history. I designed it, the initial, probably, I guess, 2010 maybe.
Oh, wow.
Long time ago, memory fades. And it was with another publisher to be kickstarted. And that's the point David got involved, because they wanted someone to help develop it. And David and I had crossed paths before when he was in England, in a London Games Club. So he knew of me and things like that. So he knew of so he was quite keen to work on Imperium.
Okay.
It wasn't even called Imperium at that point. That was what the publisher came up with. So it went to Kickstarter, and for boring reasons I won't bother to go into, it didn't happen.
Right.
So David at that point stepped in, and because he had far more contacts than none, and went round various publishers to see if anyone was interested. Okay. Osprey were keen, so we signed with them. And at that point, that's when David carried on his development work, and actually then stepped up and it became a co-design in effect.
Okay.
So that product then became Imperium Classics and Legends. Osprey made the decision to split the content, not to be core gaming expansions, but to do simultaneous release of the same game, same rule book, slightly different, well, different nations and slightly different focus. Obviously, we're very pleased that people liked it, and it took off. And then Osprey came out and said, well, can you do some more? And then we obviously there's a back and forth about what they wanted and what we wanted. What neither David or I wanted to do was, basically cookie cutter, more of the same, just reskin some decks with different art. We definitely wanted to see where we could go with the mechanisms, and also we wanted to explore, other less well-known, at least to the West, civilizations, other things that possibly been lost to history. Hence the term Horizons, although I won't claim credit for that. That name came from Osprey, but it fitted entirely with what we were trying to do.
Okay, they're pretty good with names, aren't they? So okay, yeah. So it's had a long history, and I see you've got Lord of the Rings posters in the background. So is there some inspiration from the sort of fantasy genre that Lord of the Rings is, and the extensive sort of breadth of Lord of the Rings? Or?
No, not particularly for this. I mean, Imperium's definitely, well, with the exceptions of the legendary and fictional civilizations, exactly. it's definitely buried, grounded in history. So it's far more history was where I started. I mean, the start of Imperium was I played Dominion, and the concept of not building a deck and then coming and playing it, but to build a deck as you played was like, oh my God, that's amazing. So I thought, well, how would I do it? Because obviously with Dominion, you lay out the piles at the beginning, and then, and then quite a lot of the decision making's front loaded, where you work your plan out and then execute it. Yeah. And I thought, well, would I do it that way? And of course, no, I wouldn't. I'd do it some other way. And then it took me, decades to finally come up with an alternative. That's not quite true. But, so it's a completely different way of looking at it. I went to personal market, if you like, for each civilization to bring in, the main thematic tie for each of them, so that when you play the Romans, it's got the things you'd expect the Romans to have, rather than it being, in a random market. Yeah. Okay. So
it must have taken a lot of time to balance the game out. Yeah. I mean,
well, to begin with, certainly when we're first starting out, there was lots of play tests and things like that. When we've moved to doing Horizons, we've got David had a team of keen play testers on board as well, and then we had a developer who wrote a play testing app that allowed us to, because obviously you got COVID and not being able to get together, it all made, and trying to play a card game on Tabletop Simulator was a little bit miserable. So we built a web-based application. I mean, it's not pretty, but it certainly works. So we could play that way. And then it was also very good for the solo. So we got to play lots of solo. And then the other thing he managed to do was get the app playing itself. So we iterated loads and loads of bot versus bot games. Not that that particularly matches how a human would play against a bot, but it certainly threw up, you know, some questions about, do we really want it doing that? Is that quite how it's supposed to work? And we could tell how often certain rows got triggered and that kind of thing. We would never have done with, you know, human groups of people playing it, or at least not unless you play tested for decades.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, I think we've worked. People will find the bots in Horizons a little more challenging than the ones in Classics and Legends. But some of that is because we've had extra tools to iterate, and you know, we deliberately wanted people to have a bit more of a challenge, so it wasn't just, you know, the same but different.
Wow. Okay. Computer aided design brings a new meaning to computer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the computer wasn't making the decisions; it was just running the process, and then we could look at the data coming out to see, you know, what was happening and what wasn't happening, and whether it was doing what we wanted it to do, or our intention was.
Yeah. Are you a full-time designer, or you have a real
job? I've got a full-time real job. This is just would say a hobby, but yeah, an interesting use of my time when I'm not at work.
And what's your actual job then?
I do IT support.
Okay.
So
you're
a bit different from game design. I'm on a computer, but it's a bit different from game design, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. So I also, of course, you've done Voidfall with David, and I can't remember the name of the sequel. Is it Renegade? Or not sequel, but the
but there's Star Trek Captain's Chair about to come out.
Yes. Yeah, which David mentioned to me and is very excited about. Lots of Trekkies out there, so including me. I'm quite looking forward.
Yeah, well, with Imperium, I was far more of a history buff than David. So the I guess the research and that fell on me. And sometimes David will come up with what he designed as a cool mechanism. I go, yeah, but that doesn't really fit that civilization with the way it actually happened historically, which is a little bit why we lent into some of the Martians and things like that, because we had ideas that just wouldn't fit with a actual real historical civilization.
Okay.
But on Star Trek, David is far more of a Trekkie than me. I mean, he's watched absolutely everything, I think.
Yeah.
I've seen the movies, watched Voyager when it was on telly, caught a bit of the Next Generation when it was on telly. And then beyond that, you know, just as and when. But I've never been, everyone's going to hate me, but I was always much more into Star Wars than Star Trek. I'm a fantasy science fiction person rather than the science fiction fiction person.
Yeah. No, I like both. But
so yeah, all the thematic ties that you go, oh, that's really clever. That's David, not me. Okay. I mean, I might have helped with the mechanism of the car, but David would have certainly said, "This is the thematic. This is what happened. This is how it should feel."
And is it based loosely on the same sort of mechanics as Imperium?
I think it's inspired by. So we've taken the core idea of a personal deck and a shared market, but then we've made changes that fit the Star Trek universe.
Yeah.
So, for example, rather than just being regions you take, there's a neutral zone that you send your ships to, beam down away teams, and you compete with your opponent over, or not, if they just ignore that area, over control of who controls the planet, and then you take it. So again, that was put in specifically for Star Trek. And because Star Trek and warp drive and spaceships, there's no problem with, well, how could the Tang in China interact with the Celts in Northern Europe? It doesn't make any sense when you look at it like that. So, but Star Trek doesn't have that problem. So that's one change. The second change is there's Latinum as money, but obviously the way economics works is a bit different in Star Trek to how it would work on Earth. So the way things appear and are purchased in the market's a little different. And yeah, we just changed things to fit more with the theme of Star Trek.
Wow, I'm quite excited about that. Was it difficult to get the license for the game? I mean, for Star Trek to get a Star Trek license.
Well, the way it worked out, and David, I'm not spoiling anything or giving away any industry secrets, but we were talking about what do we do next, and we were ideas about what we could do. And I said to David, well, what would be your dream game that you could design? And he said, well, Star Trek, obviously. Okay, I said, well, who's got the license? So then he went away and found out which company had the license. And then David, being the extrovert and salesman that he is rather than me, obviously went and talked to WizKids and convinced them that we had this, either we had this wonderful game or we could do this wonderful game. I'm not quite sure what he actually said, but he came back and said, if we've got interest, we need to come up with, enough of a game to show them, to convince them that it's not all talk and there is something behind it.
Yeah.
Which is then when we delved into the, well, who are you in the game? Well, you're a captain. Okay, well, what's your motivation? Which is why we again came up with missions, because if you look at Star Trek, there's always a mission of some description driving the plot. So then we had to have missions in the game, and then how do we implement them, and why would you want to go on a mission? And then that led to the tracks, and so that different captains have different motivations and different goals. Wow. So yeah, the theme drove the new mechanism we put in it for sure.
Wow. Okay. Sounds exciting. Looking forward to that. Anything else coming up from your side, Nigel?
Well, I'm working on things, but it's like, it's like, I can't tell you, because either I can't tell you because the company doesn't wants to announce it when they're going to announce it, or I can't tell you because we haven't yet got anything signed, and the last thing we want to do is either scare off someone or spin some bad luck in things. So
yeah, exactly. Okay.
There's lots of things I'm working on, but nothing I can tell anyone about at the moment.
Okay. All right.
I'd say check David's socials, because he can't resist dropping little hints here, there, and everywhere. So
okay,
he's the best person to follow if you want to get an idea of what might be coming up.
Okay. So, and you're working mostly with David, or exclusively? Or?
Well, pretty much. David's not working. David's not working exclusive with me because he's a full-time designer. I'm not a full-time designer, and my strength is not going out and selling myself or going out and networking with the industry and whatever. David's really good at that. So David does that side of things, and I'm much more back in the lab dreaming up things, and then we intersect. So some of it is David comes with a big blue sky idea of, let's do it like, I want this, and then I go, yeah, okay, but how's that actually going to work? Or the other way round, I come up with something and David goes, well, okay, well, where can we fit this in? What might this work? So we've definitely got our own strengths and weaknesses, and I think we complement each other quite well.
Yes, I think you do, and the results are very impressive. So long may it continue, I guess.
But yeah, if you want to have a chat at a convention, you're much more likely to find David than me.
Yeah, I did actually eventually. Okay, all right. Well, thanks ever so much. Congratulations again on the award. Your first for the International Gamers Award, but maybe not the last. Voidfall was also considered very highly by the committee, so it was a bit of a run-in between Nucleum and Voidfall for the best multiplayer game. So maybe next year or in a few years we'll talk again. But,
Well, thank you, and obviously thanks for considering my designs, and I'm glad David got in with Nucleum, even if he didn't make it with Voidfall.
yeah,
Exactly. But no, it's, I mean, the number of good, well, great games out every year, even just to be considered is certainly an honour.
I know, it's mind-boggling. Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, thanks ever so much, and we'll talk again soon, hopefully.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.